welcome to New West Science Lessons. Today we're going to be looking at distillation. So what we're going to be looking at today is how we can separate two liquids that have different boiling points. Okay, so what I have here, if I hold that up, is I have some inky water. Okay, I have some green ink mixed in here with water. Now the first thing that I want you to think is what is going to be the solute and the solvent in this situation. If I've added some ink into water to make this solution, what's going to be my solvent and my solute? Okay. Now on your practical sheet, it asked you to label the apparatus that I've got in front of me. Now it's quite difficult for you to be able to see that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring a camera a bit closer so that we can speak through each type of apparatus. Okay, so if I hold my phone here, what you can see is you can see the whole apparatus. Now on your practical sheet, it gives you this diagram, okay, just like what we've got here, but you have to label it, okay? Now what we can see is we have our thermometer out of the top, and then that's going into this round bottom flask at the bottom. Okay, so one of your labels is a round bottom flask. So that is where we're going to add in our green solution. Okay, so we've got a round bottom flask. Then what we have in the middle is called our condenser. And what happens here is when I turn on the tap, if I show you, when I turn on the tap, okay, there's water going through this pipe to the bottom of the condenser. Now the condenser is double layered, so what can happen is the water is flowing around that second layer in the condenser around the outside, and it is keeping anything in that inner layer nice and cool. Okay, so what happens is when our green liquid starts to evaporate in our round bottom flask, the vapours and the gas that is produced will then start to condense in our condenser, because that's going to be nice and cool because it has got tap water circulating around it. Then what happens is the water gets to the top of the condenser and it comes down this other pipe and drains back into our sink here. And then hopefully what we will see is we will see some water being dropped down this tube and being collected in our beaker. So at this point, what I want you to do is I want you to make a prediction about what we're going to see once I start heating up the round bottom flask with the green solution in it. I want you to have had a thought about what our solute and our solvent is. Have a look back at what the definitions of those are if you can't remember. And I also want you to have a think about what our independent, dependent and control variable are. Okay, so hopefully you've thought about those questions now. Now, hopefully what you came to think about was that in here we have our green dye, our like green food colouring, and we also have our water. So our water is going to be our solvent and our solute is going to be the green dye, because that is what has been dissolved in our water. And we have made then our green solution. Okay, and we want to separate those. Our problem that we're trying to fix in this experiment today is we want to get the green dye and the water separate from each other, and we can do that using this distillation equipment. Now I asked you to think about what your dependent, independent and control variable would be. Now the independent variable is the thing that I am changing, and the thing that I am changing in this experiment is the temperature that this is happening at. So what I might have to do is I might have to leave this this round bottom flask to be heated for longer than what I might have predicted. Okay, the thing that I am controlling is the amount of liquid that I am putting in. Okay, so I'm going to just put this amount of liquid in. It is roughly 25 centimetres cubed, and I am also going to keep the Bunsen burner at a steady flame. Okay, so let's have a think about what we're going to see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my dye solution into my round bottom flask. I'll put my goggles on first. So I just take out the thermometer. I'm going to add in my solution. Okay, so added my solution, my inky solution, into my round bottom flask now. Now I already have the tap going, so I've already got my water going around my condenser, keeping that nice and cool. Now the next step that I need to do is add my Bunsen burner under the round bottom flask. Okay, now I want you to recap and have a think about the two processes that happen in distillation. There is two processes. One of them happens in the round bottom flask, so something happens, a state change happens in the round bottom flask, and then another state change happens in the condenser. So have a think about those, okay, and think about those what those two processes were called. So I'm going to put my round bottom flask over the Bunsen burner to heat it up. Going to keep it moving around. And hopefully, in a few minutes' time, what we will see is some pure, colourless, okay, water dripping into our beaker. So what I'm doing here is I'm heating up my round bottom flask, okay, and then what should happen is the liquid that has the lowest boiling point will evaporate first, will turn into a vapour. Now when that turns into a vapour, it will turn into a gas, okay? It will turn into a gas, and then when it hits that condenser where it's nice and cool because of the tap water that's flowing around it, it will then condense. And remember, condensing happens when a gas turns to a liquid. So when that gas turns to a liquid, it should then drop down into our beaker. So I can see that in the round bottom flask, the solution is starting to bubble. So hopefully some of that liquid is turning into a gas now. So I'm going to carry on doing this for a few minutes, and then when some clear solution starts dropping into the beaker, I will hold it up to the camera so that you can see better. Okay, so I've been heating this for a few minutes now. Okay, I have to keep moving the Bunsen burner away so that the liquid doesn't boil too vigorously. But what I can start to see in my condenser is there is a few beads of water that are trickling down. So in a few minutes' time, I predict that some water is going to drop into that beaker. So I will keep you updated at what we see. Okay, amazing. We've had our first drop of water. I will hold that up to the camera for you in a moment, but I'm going to carry on heating it for a few minutes longer just to see if we can get any more. Okay, so what I want to be able to show you a bit closer is, if I turn this back onto a hot flame, is as I am heating up the liquid, okay, the solution, heating that up, okay, what we can see is so as I am heating up the solution, what we can see is the so as I've been heating up that solution, what we can see is the liquid has been evaporating, okay? So that's our first process, evaporation. The liquid that has the lowest boiling point will evaporate first, okay? So that's been evaporating, and then the gas that has been produced has been travelling up this tube. Now when it hits a condenser, which has cold water travelling around it, it starts to condense, okay? So that is our second process that's happening. So our first process is the boiling, that happens in the round bottom flask because of the high temperature. Then it condenses when it hits that cold water that's coming from the tap. And then what happens is it drops down here into our beaker. Now if I hold this really closely, what you should be able to see is we have got maybe 1 centimetre, 2 centimetre cube of pure water there. If we compare that to the solution we started with, that has slightly changed colour under heating, but it's still quite, it's still showing quite a deep colour, okay, we can see that that water that we've collected is pure water. It doesn't contain any of the solute anymore. Okay, so with that close-up that I've just shown you, you should have been able to see that we had a good few drops of pure water drop into our beaker. Now that was because we had had two processes that had happened. We'd had the boiling, okay, or the evaporation. We'd had the evaporation of the liquid that had the lowest boiling point, and then we had the where it condensed at the condenser. So we need to fill in this table now, which should be on your support sheet. So it's under 5.2.5 support sheet. Now before distillation, we had a green solution. And you could almost put here what our solute and our solvent were, okay? So our solute was the green dye and our solvent was the water. Now during distillation, what we saw was evaporation and then we saw condensation in our condenser. Okay, and then because of these two processes, we saw pure water droplets in the condenser. Now, after distillation, what we saw on that close-up was we had pure water collected in our beaker. Okay, so what you should be able to do now is you should be able to write a conclusion about which one out of the two liquids had a higher and lower boiling point. So which one evaporated first? It was the water, because that's what was collected first. So have a check if that matches with your prediction that we wrote at the beginning of the lesson, and make sure that you've labelled all of your diagram correctly. Okay, hopefully you really enjoyed that video, and we'll be back next week with some more fun chemistry practicals. See you next time.